And we're only talking about 2-3 games of separation between 3 through 9 last year. So if the Lakers are one of those teams that's in the high 40s pushing for 50 wins, I think they could be the 3 or 4 seed in the West and potentially give themselves a chance to get to the second round. And then we know what LeBron can do in the playoffs. He can get teams pretty far and have them overachieve. So the Western Conference is tough. There's a lot more depth in it, but there's a lot of questions on some of these teams, how they're building out their rosters as of right now.
Yeah, and I still say and I still believe that this is a 2-part miniseries for the Lakers. This is the team that they're going into the season with, and then we'll see how many wins they have halfway through the season. You get the All-Star break coming, you get the trade deadline, and I think that the Lakers will be serious about making a few power plays with the trade deadline to make sure that they have at least 1 or 2 other pieces that can help LeBron try to get past the Rockets, the Warriors, and then any other team that, shows up for 3rd or 4th seed in the Western Conference. So we'll see. It could be an interesting year for the Lakers, but I agree. I think they just get over the hump. I think they make the playoffs at this point with what we see on their depth chart right now. But beyond that, I don't think they make a deep run without some other changes.
Well, Eric, one team we talked about that's got some questions about what their roster is going to look like for this upcoming season is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Story that we covered back when OKC got knocked out of the first round of the playoffs by the Utah Jazz was, what is the future of Carmelo Anthony with this team? We talked about the fact he had almost a $29 million player option, and that we, even 3 months ago, were almost certain he would opt in, because where is a player like Carmelo Anthony going to go get $29 million for one season of work? Especially in the landscape we've seen, where now these second-tier guys that we touched on last week, many of them are still unsigned. Zach LaVine is the only player that was even given an offer sheet, and that was really the Kings forcing the Bulls' hand and getting him a huge deal, which most people feel is not even close to market value, that he should have been a lot lower. Well, Carmelo Anthony and the Oklahoma City Thunder looks like a divorce is coming. They are working together to facilitate a trade. Carmelo and his representatives have met with the Miami Heat and the Houston Rockets while the NBA Summer League is going on, trying to work something out. Oklahoma City almost has to get rid of him. Their tax bill with him on the roster, their payroll, Eric, was going to be about $300 million for a team that got knocked out in the first round. It really, the only addition that they've made is adding in Nerlens Noel. And we already know what Brian Colangelo thinks of him thanks to his burner account. So all that being said, Oklahoma City, their management, they have had a strange last 5 to 7 years. Losing Harden, not wanting to pay into the luxury tax, a few $1 million just to keep Harden. They trade him to Houston. That facilitated basically opening up the door for Kevin Durant to want to leave because it was just him and Westbrook, and we know he didn't like that style that Westbrook played. They then get desperate, make the move for Paul George. They sign him to a massive deal. Now they brought in Carmelo Anthony last year. They traded away Cantor. Eric, it seems like this team has kind of been chasing its tail now ever since the issues with Harden and then losing Durant. Do you like the fact that Oklahoma City is aggressive, or was this just a move that was doomed from failure from the beginning?
You got to like that they're aggressive out of a small market team. They know that they're up against the bigger markets like that Lakers market, like that Knicks market. And there's some big players, some big names out there that they knew really that they didn't have a shot at. The fact that they got Paul George, I think, is the turning point because you have a player that now has chosen Oklahoma City. I think that's forward momentum. And I think what that says is that now you turn the page. You don't worry about the deals that you had made. You don't worry about the Durants that you've lost. I think now you move forward. 2018-2019 season, you get momentum behind Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and the other members of that team, and you do let Carmelo Anthony go. You chalk that up as an experiment that didn't work, but now you've got a base. Now you've got a foundation. You've got two players that seem to want to be there in Russ and PG-13, and that's what you focus on. If you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, if you're the GM, you focus on the positives and you focus on those two superstars wanting to be in a Thunder uniform. You build around them, and you do take this opportunity to wipe your hands of Carmelo Anthony's contract, Carmelo Anthony's style of play, all the headaches and things that come along with Carmelo Anthony. I think it's time to do away with them. So I like what they're doing. I mean, yeah, have they been super aggressive after the Harden thing? Yeah, they really have. But for a small market team, I think they've done a lot of trying, and I like that a whole lot better than a GM and an owner, just throwing their hands up in the air and saying, well, we're going to tank for 5 years, and then we'll see what we get, in 2020. I like what they've done. I think that they have every shot at making the playoffs and making a deep run, and I don't think it hurts them at all that Carmelo Anthony's not there.
I agree. I think it helps them that Carmelo's not there. Look, people can go back on our show last year, back in July, when this deal went down, of what our opinions were, that it was a mistake to go get Carmelo Anthony. I like the fact that Sam Presti in the front office has been aggressive there. The Paul George, that was it was a high risk, high reward type deal for him. They let go Victor Oladipo. We've seen the type of talent that he can be. Sabonis got a lot of minutes into that playoff series with Cleveland. He looks like he's going to be a good player for them. So they gave up a lot of pieces to get a guy that could have walked. But they sold their program to him, made him feel comfortable, made him feel welcome, made him feel that was home, and he bought into it. So that aggressive side, I thought, was well worth the risk for them to be able to bring him in. Carmelo, Eric, I think he is the most overrated NBA player maybe we've seen in a long, long time. Look, he's a great offensive player for the game of the NBA, how it was 5, 7+ years ago when it was a lot of ISO ball. But the way the NBA is today, you can't just come up the court, throw a guy a ball on the wing with 20 seconds left on the shot clock and just watch him dribble the clock out and take a contested mid-range shot. That's just not the NBA of today. Analytics get blown out a lot in the NBA, but the one thing it is true about them is if you're going to shoot a 15 to 19-foot jump shot that's contested and you're going to shoot in the mid 40% from the field from that, why not just shoot more threes where you may shoot a lesser percent, but by the time things work themselves out, you actually come out ahead by getting that extra point every time you make a shot. And Carmelo's just never been able to adapt to that. It's just always been ISO ball, and he just wasn't a fit. I didn't see that being a good fit for him. He's never been on a team that's been able to win, even when he had talent in Denver. He stripped the Knicks of their talent. He's always been a guy that's been about the money. He had a chance to go to a very good Chicago team years ago, didn't want to give up the extra max money that the Knicks could give him at the time. I think they're going to actually be better without him, Eric, and they played better when he was off the floor. They made runs in those Jazz games when they got down, when Carmelo went to the bench. You can remember him standing on the sideline begging Mo Cheeks to talk to Billy Donovan to get him back into the game, and you can't do that when your team is on such a massive run. And I think Oklahoma City just plays more open. They play more free. They keep the ball in the hands of Russ and Paul George. That's who you want the ball in the hands of to facilitate your offense. So I think they're going to be better off for it. They're going to save a boatload of money on the luxury tax, which is also huge for them. So, Eric, I just see that. I just don't know where Carmelo's a fit. You see now, I talked about that he's met with Houston. He's met with Miami. Houston, they sort of have to get over the Mike D'Antoni factor. Remember, he was his coach in New York when things sort of started to fall apart. They didn't seem to have a great relationship there. D'Antoni reportedly has been trying to sell the fact that this is a much, much different situation in Houston. And Houston's all in on trying to get Carmelo. Doesn't seem like the Lakers are in this mix that we may thought about that if he would possibly want to team up with LeBron. I haven't really seen any reports that they're in on this mix. Seems to be Houston and Miami. When you look at those two teams, do you feel one of them is a better fit for Melo than the other?
For him personally, I would have to say Houston, just because it's the only chance of him finishing off his career with a championship. Miami, they're not really doing a whole lot down there. And so if I look at their depth chart and you think, okay, if they add Carmelo Anthony to the wing, and you got Kelly Olynyk or Josh Richardson, he's going to fit in with those guys, Justice Winslow, James Johnson. It's not a huge successful roster down there. You've got Dragic running the point and Dion Waiters at shooting guard, and probably the best player they have, in my opinion, is Hassan Whiteside. But that's not a strong roster. Now, I don't know if they'll get Dwayne Wade back this year or not, but you know what's interesting is as I was listening to you talk about Carmelo and his career and being a great shooter, I remember the fact that him and Dwayne Wade, the guys that we just spoke of, and LeBron James, they're all from the 2003 draft class.
Yep.
That was a pretty strong draft class. LeBron, of course, went first. We know Darko Milicic went second, but then Carmelo Anthony went third because he had a ton of promise coming out of Syracuse University. I would say from the amount of points he has scored in this league, over 25,000, actually 3,000 more points than Dwayne Wade, he's been a success as a scorer. But what worries me about Carmelo Anthony is two things. Number one, people still treat him as if he's a name in this league. Oh, where's Melo going? Oh, what's Melo doing? And Justin, I got to tell you, I don't really understand that anymore, because he spent 7.5 years in Denver before getting traded to the Knicks. He spent 7.5 years in New York and then went to the last season in Oklahoma City. And he's only been out of the first round of the playoffs a couple of times. Otherwise, he's been bumped from the playoffs after the first round almost his entire career. Now, that certainly has to do with the teams that he's on. I don't think Denver was ever a powerhouse when he was there. I don't think the Knicks were ever a powerhouse when he was there. He can't take all of the blame for that. However, as you alluded to, and I think it's probably the best point in this whole thing, is that he's always been treated as a name because of the promise he had coming out of Syracuse. Melo, Melo, Melo. And he's never delivered on it. That's the thing. He's never delivered on being Melo. And so they dump all of this assets, whether it's in New York or wherever, to keep and get Melo. And then it robs the team of so much other talent that then when it comes playoff time, Melo's not the guy like LeBron who's going to get you over the hump. He takes and misses way too many shots. In order to get that 25,000 points in his career, he's taken a ton of shots. His field goal percentage is over 5 points worse than LeBron's and 4 points worse than Wade's. He just has a one-dimensional ability. And when you're looking at championships and you're looking at his career as a whole, that's what he's going to be known for, because he wasn't the guy who could deliver any team over that hump. So for him, you got to go to the Rockets if you have a chance, because he's not going to take Miami anywhere over that hump with the roster that they have. He's going to finish his career without a championship for sure if he goes to Miami. At least in Houston, next couple of years, he has a chance. But remember, as we just said, 2003 draft class, there's only a few guys even left from that draft class, LeBron James being one of them. And we talk all the time, it's amazing how well he still plays for his age. Carmelo, Wade, even Kyle Korver was in that class. They're on their way down. There's only a year or two left. So Melo's got to make a choice for him, and it's got to be Houston.
Yeah, and you made a great point. Just to clarify from my end, my point of him being overrated is really, like you said, the last 5 years or so, where everybody considers him basically the player that he was when his first 7, 8, 9 years in the league, where he was a tremendous scorer, but that's all he was. He was a tremendous scorer as a volume shooter. If you give LeBron or any other top 20 player in the league the green light the way that Carmelo had to get 25, 30, 35 shots a game, I think they would have scored at a much higher rate than they currently have been in terms of their points per game that it took Carmelo. Carmelo, to get basically less points than some of these great scorers, was taking way more shots than them because there was really no other options, especially went to New York. It would be nothing to look at a box score and see him have Russell Westbrook-like numbers, where he's shooting the ball 27, 33, 36 times a game to get his 35 points. And he just wasn't an effective shooter. And the last 5 years, Eric, he really hasn't done anything. So all this talk to even think he's going to go to a team and put them over the hump, I feel is overblown anyways. For Carmelo, if his best chance to win a title, you're right, is probably with Houston. It's what Carmelo's ego is. If he still thinks he's a guy that can come in and contribute and he has to be the first or second option on the team, he better go to Miami, because at least in Miami, there's not really a name there. And even with Dwayne Wade, Wade was getting no minutes really in Cleveland. One of the reasons they traded him was once they got Clarkson and Nance and George Hill, they didn't know how he was going to fit in. He probably wasn't going to get much run. So they basically did him a favor and sent him back to Miami, who immediately gave him minutes. So Miami is a team that probably could use him, could use a name, could use a guy late in games that could go ISO and get them a bucket when they need. So that's what Melo has to weigh. If he wants the chance to win a title and make a deep playoff run, it's Houston. If he wants to be a name and continue kind of playing that ego type basketball where he doesn't want to come off the bench and he still wants to be a main option and a main threat, then he better go to Miami, or I don't think it's going to work in Houston. So that's a wrap for segment one with our NBA talk. Obviously, one of the big stories out there is what the Spurs will